Frieren is an anime that's taken the world by storm. It's become an instant classic, not just because of how it writes its characters, but also how it tackles its themes in such an interesting way. And I've had the privilege of rewatching it in preparation for the release of Season 2. The show talks about the brevity of human life, the passage of time and the impact it has on the world, and the tragedy of knowing the importance of something only after it has faded away. But gender is also something that the show has a quiet commentary on. Frieren has been praised time and time again for how it writes its female characters, especially for an anime which, as a medium, has been notorious for how many popular titles choose to portray women. The show isn't afraid to break gender norms by portraying its women as powerful, dangerous, emotionally controlled, and ways that many people would conclude to be unladylike. And on that note, I asked the question, what about the men? This video aims to talk about how Frieren writes men. And before we get to that, I'll of course have to discuss spoilers, so consider this a warning. And with that, let's begin this video by talking about the most prominent man in the series, Himmel, otherwise known as Himmel the Hero, the face and leader of the legendary party that slayed the Demon King and brought peace to the realm. Everybody in the world has heard the stories time and time again, but those don't paint the entire picture of who Himmel was. As heroic as he was in life, Himmel was very much a human being. That is to say that he wasn't perfect. On the very first day of their adventure, he was almost executed by the king because he was disrespectful. And in Himmel's prime, he was incredibly vain. He was obsessed with his appearance and boastful of his good looks, much to the chagrin of those around him, and he was very particular about getting his face preserved for years to come. But while on the surface he may look like the typical fantasy hero, Himmel is in a lot of ways a very interesting subversion of the trope, because while Himmel is vain and proud, he doesn't do it in a way that puts anybody else down. So Himmel likes the way he looks. So what? It's not like he's insulting Heiter or Eisen or anybody else. His high opinion of himself is treated as a character trait, not as a fatal flaw. Typically in media, especially in anime, humble characters, or the ones that let their actions do the talking, are the ones that we tend to root for. Just off the top of my head, I can name characters like Deku from My Hero Academia, Saitama from One Punch Man, and even Frieren herself. Note how many characters throughout the series tend to recognize her as a familiar figure, usually citing that the legendary party of Himmel the Hero had an elven mage, yet she never announces her identity or confirms their suspicions. But Himmel isn't like that. Himmel wants to be praised, he wants to be remembered, he wants people to know that he's the hero who saved the world, and perhaps that's not a bad thing. Because remember that the world of Frieren is a desolate one. Before the Demon King was slain and the world knew peace, demons were razing entire villages, vaporizing armies with magic they knew nothing about, and everything seemed hopeless. Humanity had its heroes, but they were wiped out like cannon fodder, until Himmel vowed to defeat the Demon King and delivered. The fact that Himmel and his friends were able to conquer the greatest evil, and because of it the world was finally able to usher in an era of peace, is something worth remembering and celebrating. Because in the world of Frieren, appearances do matter and are worth stretching the truth for. While being truthful is something that we attribute to moral goodness, sometimes it's better to let people believe in a hopeful lie than to let them know the ugly truth. This is a recurring theme in the story, notably when Himmel fails to pull out the hero's blade, showing that he's not the prophesized hero. He is still the one to defeat the Demon King. And again, when Sir Olden needs Stark to play the part of this fallen son, Wirt to keep up appearances so the men of his kingdom don't lose morale fighting against the remnants of the Demon King's army. The world is already a horrible place, and people look to their leaders, their heroes, to inspire them to keep fighting. Imagine the chaos that would ensue if people found out that Himmel was not actually able to pull out the hero's blade, because that would also imply that the Demon King is not the great calamity that would destroy this world, and something even more dangerous is coming in the future. How far in the future? Who's to say? But thematically, it's beautiful that a hero who supposedly wasn't the chosen one was able to rise up and save the world anyway. The beauty of Himmel's character is that his vanity and pride can ultimately lead to good things. We see that the impact of one's deeds can be temporary. For example, in episode 2, when Frieren and Fern visit a town and search for the blue moon weed flowers, only the old herbalist lady was alive to witness Himmel the hero saving the town. Thus, she was the only person who placed any sense of importance in caring for his statue. The fact that the statue even exists is a result of Himmel's vanity. While Frieren says that Himmel should have refused, the remembrance of a hero's deeds serves a greater purpose than serving their own ego. It's a reminder to the people that in times of great distress, when all hope seems lost, good will find a way to rise and fight back against the darkness. Himmel was indeed a good man, and besides slaying the Demon King, helped many people along the way. But the impact of his acts is ultimately only as temporary as the people he helps. Which is why preserving the memory of his deeds through stories passed on for generations is so important. Especially because while he was prideful, Himmel was a genuinely good person. He was altruistic, he saved people's lives. Even after the party defeated the Demon King, he would make an annual trip to a backwater town just to see that the sealed demon nearby was still under control, all the way up until the year he died. Himmel's character and the way he's written shows the complexities of Frieren's world and why it's so different from other works of fiction. In many other media, Himmel's pride would be his downfall, a flaw that would make the viewer hate him. Instead, his desire to be known and remembered led to him being able to inspire others to do good even after his time. And Frieren's commentary on pride and the presence of it is made abundantly clear by another character, specifically one that lacks pride. Sein. In a lot of ways, I consider Sein to be the anti-Himmel. While both are ultimately good people and have traveled with Frieren, the way they carry themselves is completely opposite from each other. While Himmel puts a lot of weight into his appearance as a hero, Sein doesn't put any weight into his appearance as a priest. He doesn't seem to care about other people's opinion of him. He drinks, gambles, smokes, and talks a lot about loving older women. In fact, Sein seems to carry himself very lowly. He believes he's past his prime, he regrets not being an adventurer earlier in his life, and seems to be content in allowing that regret to control his present and future. But still, Sein is a pretty amazing person. His people skills are greatly welcomed in the group as he's able to diffuse situations between Fern and Stark while teaching them to be able to communicate their feelings better. He's a remarkable healer, being able to instantly cure Stark when he's brought to the church, and finally he's able to figure out how the Chaos Bloom works and ultimately saves the town with the help of Frieren. As a character, Sein does not try to play the part of a hero, but that doesn't change the fact that he undoubtedly is one. And another aspect of Sein's character that I love is that his fate isn't tied to Frieren and the party. In other works, despite his motivation for joining the party being able to find his lost friend, Sein may have chosen to stay with the group because it was required to have a healer. Instead, Sein leaves, and rather unceremoniously at that. This is another testament to how well written the world of Frieren is. The side characters have their own wants in their lives that aren't tied to anybody but themselves, and this makes the world feel alive. And while we said farewell to Sein, we may actually run into him again in the future. And with that, let's move on to the next male character that I want to discuss, Eisen. Eisen is an interesting character because out of the entire cast, he's the most traditionally masculine. In Himmel's party, he's the vanguard, a legendary warrior with renowned strength and constitution. While we ultimately don't get to spend too much time with Eisen, we do get a lot of backstories with him in them. And through these backstories, we found out that, like warriors are typically expected to be, he was tough. He was able to shrug off poison like it was nothing, and he would jump off great heights and emerge unscathed, all while having the same stoic expression plastered on his face. But despite this image of a hardy dwarven warrior, Eisen was afraid. He would tremble before big jobs, he would talk about his fear with his friends, and at some point he even feared Stark, acknowledging his apprentice's incredible strength. As powerful as Eisen was, he knew that fear was natural. He acknowledged that fear, something that people typically view as weak and unmanly, is something that everybody has, because to be afraid means to acknowledge one's mortality, one's limitations as an individual, and as we see through another character, that's the first step to being able to surpass them. And of course, I'm talking about Stark. Stark is Eisen's estranged apprentice, and when we first meet him, it's a bit of a pathetic sight. He views himself as a coward who only lived after staring down a dragon because he got lucky. But as we get to know Stark, we get to understand where this low self-esteem comes from. His hometown was wiped out by monsters, thus he's afraid of them, and even before then, his father would berate him for his lack of fighting talent. And this belief that he was useless and no good was something that would stick with him as he grew older. Even when he was training under Eisen, he claimed that the dwarf never once praised him, which, in addition to his backstory, it makes sense why Stark believes he's unable to defeat the dragon terrorizing the town. And yet Stark is powerful enough to be able to take the dragon down in less than a minute. Like a lot of young men, Stark just lacks validation. Most men aren't used to receiving praise or compliments and go years without ever being acknowledged. And Stark represents the consequences of this truth very well. But he also represents the ideal reaction to a lack of validation. Instead of crying about how it wasn't freely given to him, he earns it through hard work, being able to cut through a cliffside through sheer force. And when Frieren praises Stark with just a simple sentence, you can tell the moment sticks with him. Just like how this last character's impact stuck with us throughout the story. Heiter is the first character that we truly get to know in the series, and more than any other character in the show, Heiter embodies how we're supposed to look at everybody in the story. Because early on, we look at Heiter and we see him as a kind of joke character. Frieren repeatedly calls him a corrupt priest, and he has a serious alcohol problem. In any other story, Heiter's alcoholism would be focused on as a moral failure, but much like Himmel's Pride, it's just a character trait, one that he would eventually even go on to stop having. And as we learn more about Heiter, we understand why he is the way he is. Heiter was an orphan. He likely didn't have a happy childhood, and maybe that's why he drank so much in life. And maybe that's why he gives up drinking when he adopts Fern, because he wants to set a good example for his adopted daughter, even if he does teach her that alcohol is the best medicine. But he also brings joy to his friends. While the show does make it a point to show that Heiter is useless when he's drunk, he can also be the literal life of the party. Remember when people are mocking Frieren for not showing emotion after the death of Himmel, it's Heiter who diverts attention to himself away from her. He's also cunning. He was able to deduce that Frieren was hiding her true mana capacity, and later on was able to trick her into training Fern into becoming a mage. Heiter's character is interesting because he's the first person that we truly get to know in the series, and sets the example for what we're supposed to expect from the rest of the story. The beauty of how Frieren Writes Men is that it never falls into the trap of relying on tropes, caricatures, and gender roles to write its characters. Everybody feels fleshed out in some way. And this isn't done for the sake of subverting expectations, but to portray a universal truth. It's impossible to truly capture the essence of a person into just one or two details. Werbel may look like a heartless mercenary, but he has a love for his hometown, and even has to mentally prepare himself before he takes a life. Denkin is an influential mage with money and power, but the only thing he's ever wanted was to honor his dead wife. Richter looks like a put-together rich man, but when required, he can be a stone-cold killer, and that's completely understandable because he works retail. I love how Frieren writes men, and all of its characters for that matter, because it writes them as how anybody wants to be perceived as. A living, breathing person with all the complexities that come with being one.